when it seems like nobody is caring about your CBA anymore because the NBA gambling situation sucked all the air out of the basketball room and the basketball world, to be honest. When all of that happens, signal from the bullpen, Caitlin Clark's name.
In a stunning turn of events, Caitlin Clark's loyal fan base has turned their fury toward WNBA star Napheesa Collier, accusing her of shamelessly using Clark's name to push her own agenda.
Collier was awfully quiet when Caitlin Clark was getting her brains beat out last year. In 2024, the rookie season. Where were you? Where were you? I mean, look, is she coming to grips with the fact that Caitlin Clark is the whole damn league, nothing but the league, it's so help me God? Is she coming to facts with that? Maybe. Good.
What started as a discussion about fair pay in the league quickly spiraled into chaos when Collier dropped Clark's name in her latest media appearances, and fans weren't having it. Across social media, outrage exploded as supporters called out the hypocrisy of players who once stayed silent when Clark was targeted on the court. But this controversy is only getting started.
I don't know if these players were in denial. Hell, I don't know what they're thinking. But let me summon Caitlin Clark's name for the sake of the CBA.
It all started with one interview, a seemingly harmless conversation that quickly turned into a wildfire across social media. Napheesa Collier, star forward for the Minnesota Lynx and co-founder of the rival league, Unrivaled, sat down for what was supposed to be a discussion about the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement. Instead, she lit a match that Caitlin Clark's fans were ready to explode over.
Ongoing negotiations became a mainstream story in the sports world after Napheesa Collier put WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert on blast during an exit interview at the end of September. And we're going to get to some fan reaction on Collier pulling Caitlin Clark's name out of her satchel bag yet again.
During the interview, Collier mentioned Clark by name, saying the young star should be grateful for the WNBA platform that allows her to make millions off the court. Instantly, fans saw a red dot to Clark's massive following. Those words were an insult, not just to their favorite player, but to everything she's done to elevate the league.
At one point in her passionate tirade, Collier claimed that Engelbert had said to her earlier this year Caitlin Clark should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything.
Collier framed her comments as part of a larger argument for better player compensation. But the way she invoked Clark's name felt personal. Fans flooded X, Instagram, and YouTube with posts accusing Collier of using Clark's success as leverage for her own goals. You weren't defending her when she was getting elbowed on the court. One viral comment read, "But now that she's profitable, suddenly you care." That sentiment echoed across every major platform.
Collier said, the founder of a competitor Unrivaled said, "The amount of money that Caitlin Clark has made the league is insane." True statement. "And she's getting 0% of it because we have no revenue share." Also a correct statement. "She gets less than $80,000 a year and she's bringing in like what? Hundreds of millions of dollars. It's insane."
The timing only made things worse. Clark had just finished one of the toughest stretches of her young career, enduring physical play, inconsistent officiating, and endless criticism from peers. Yet she stayed composed, professional, and focused on the game. For her supporters, Collier's sudden concern rang hollow. It looked like opportunism, a desperate attempt to attach her name to the most marketable athlete in the league.
Collier calling attention to the massive gap between what Caitlin Clark makes and what she brings to the WNBA in terms of revenue is only going to increase the pressure on Engelbert and the league office already faced to do their players right. Except a lot of people getting a little tired of Napheesa. They are. Now, you see that little headline right there. Shamelessly plugging Caitlin Clark's name. WNBA players react to Collier leveraging Fever Star's fame to push CBA demands. Yeah, I mean, you need her now?
By the end of the week, hashtags like hashtag Stop Using Caitlyn and hashtag ProtectCC were trending. Sports talk shows began dissecting every quote, and fans demanded accountability from players who once ignored Clark's mistreatment. But this was only the beginning, because Collier's next move would pour gasoline on an already raging fire.
She's using her name for her gain and the gain of the rest of the players. Again, where were you going to bat for her while she's getting the bionic elbow put on her last year during games? Now they want to talk about Caitlin Clark. Shaking my damn head. Using Caitlyn's name again.
After the initial backlash, Napheesa Collier tried to clarify her comments. But instead of cooling things down, she made things worse. In a follow-up interview with Glamour magazine, she doubled down, saying, "The amount of money Caitlin Clark has made the league is insane, and she's getting 0% of it." At first glance, it sounded like she was defending Clark, but fans weren't fooled. They saw through the polished language to them. Collier was strategically using Clark's name to fuel her own. Fight for a bigger slice of the WNBA revenue pie. It wasn't that fans disagreed with her point about pay inequality. In fact, many agreed that WNBA salaries lag far behind what players deserve. The problem was how and when Collier chose to make her case. Where was this outrage, they asked, when Clark was being body-checked on live TV, taunted by veterans, and left to fend for herself during her rookie season? Where were these same voices when Clark took hard fouls from Angel Reese or Marina Mabrey, while the league and its players stayed silent? Now that Clark's name carried massive attention, Collier suddenly seemed eager to link herself to her success. Critics labeled it profitable activism, the kind that looks good in interviews but rings hollow when examined closely. Even fellow WNBA fans began pointing out the irony. Collier and Breena Stewart, both co-founders of a rival league, were using Clark's popularity to pressure WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert in their ongoing CBA negotiations. It didn't look like sisterhood. It looked like strategy. Sports analysts began calling it the Caitlin Clark effect. Everyone wants to criticize her, compete with her, or capitalize on her name. And in this case, Collier's attempt to speak for all players only fueled the perception that many within the league see Clark less as a teammate and more as a ticket. But the real explosion came when fans discovered what Collier said next about revenue sharing, and that's when things turned brutal. When Collier's comments about revenue sharing hit the airwaves, the internet went into overdrive. She argued that players like Clark were being taken advantage of, claiming it should be illegal for the league to profit off Clark's name without giving her a share of the revenue. The statement sounded bold, even noble, until fans started connecting the dots. How could someone who stood silent when Clark was physically targeted all season suddenly claim to be her champion? To them, Collier wasn't fighting for justice. She was fighting for exposure. Social media erupted with side-by-side clips on one side, Collier's recent interviews talking about fairness and equity. On the other, old footage of her staying quiet during press conferences when Clark was being assaulted on court. One comment captured the mood perfectly. Now that Caitlyn's name brings views and clicks, everyone's a feminist hero. Fans accused Collier of selective empathy, ignoring Clark's struggles when it didn't benefit her, then cashing in on her fame when it did. The frustration wasn't just about words, it was about timing. The WNBA was in the middle of collective bargaining negotiations, with players demanding a higher revenue share. The spotlight on Clark had created leverage, and Collier knew it. But instead of rallying players through unity, she weaponized Clark's popularity to make a political statement. That, for many fans, was the breaking point. Sports forums filled with debate threads dissecting every nuance. Some said Collier's comments reflected real leadership, that she was just using the biggest name in basketball to spark change. But most saw it as exploitation, a calculated PR move disguised as advocacy. Even neutral fans began to feel uneasy watching the same players who had once criticized Clark now pretending to stand beside her. By the end of that week, the conversation had shifted. It wasn't about salaries or fairness anymore. It was about trust, integrity, And who was truly standing up for Caitlin Clark, not just standing on her name? And as tempers flared, one uncomfortable truth started to surface. Jealousy might be driving more than just the headlines. As the backlash deepened, fans began connecting this controversy to something bigger, a deep-rooted jealousy that's been simmering in the WNBA since Caitlin Clark's arrival. Her record-breaking viewership, jersey sales, and endorsement deals have completely shifted the league's spotlight. But with that spotlight came resentment. Many players who had spent years grinding for recognition suddenly found themselves overshadowed by a 22-year-old rookie whose influence extended far beyond the court. And when Napheesa Collier used Clark's name again, fans saw it as proof that envy, not advocacy, was driving the conversation. The numbers tell the story clearly. Ratings for Fever games skyrocketed the moment Clark debuted. Merchandise sales soared. Every arena she played in was sold out. Meanwhile, veteran players who once struggled to get media coverage were now being asked about Clark in every interview. That shift wasn't easy to swallow. Some embraced it, understanding that Clark's rise meant more visibility for everyone. But others, like Collier, seemed to use her name to stay relevant in a world that suddenly revolved around the Iowa superstar. Commentators began calling it the Clark effect, but fans had a harsher label: clout chasing. They pointed out how certain players had mocked or ignored Clark during the season, only to use her success as a talking point once it suited them. To fans, this wasn't solidarity. It was self-promotion disguised as sisterhood. The anger wasn't just about Collier's words, it was about what they represented: the inability of some players to celebrate another woman's success without trying to benefit from it. Even journalists began picking up the narrative. Headlines read, "Collier using Clark's fame for leverage," and fans see through the WNBA's double standard. The league's image took another hit. As social media turned into a battlefield between those defending Clark and those defending Collier. But things were about to get worse, because the next chapter in this drama exposed not just jealousy, but the WNBA's deeper divide, one that threatened to tear the players' unity apart completely. When the dust settled, the real issue wasn't just Napheesa Collier's comments, it was what they revealed about the fractured state of the WNBA. Already walking a thin line between growth and controversy, suddenly found itself caught in a public civil war. On one side were the players who rallied behind Collier, insisting her message was about fairness and equality. On the other were those who felt she was exploiting Caitlin Clark's popularity to pressure league leadership and manipulate fan sentiment. The split was undeniable, and it was tearing through locker rooms and social media feeds alike. What frustrated fans most was how selective the outrage seemed to be. Many of the same players who now preached unity were silent when Clark was being mistreated on the court. They said nothing when she was shoved, elbowed, and mocked. Now, when there's money on the table and negotiations for the new collective bargaining agreement heating up, everyone suddenly wanted to defend her. The hypocrisy couldn't be ignored. To fans, it looked like Clark was being used both as a marketing tool and as a bargaining chip. Analysts started pointing out how Collier's unrivaled league, conveniently, benefited from the WNBA's current instability. By drawing attention to the pay gap and using Clark's name to spark outrage, Collier was also promoting her own rival brand, a move that didn't go unnoticed by the public. It created a narrative that players were no longer united under the WNBA banner, but competing for influence and financial power. That tension seeped into how fans viewed the entire league. Supporters who once tuned in for the love of the game now questioned the authenticity of the players' motives. Was this about equality or ego? About raising everyone's platform or just staying relevant while Clark dominated headlines? The WNBA's image crisis was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding in real time. And as critics pointed out, the damage wasn't just to Collier's reputation, but to the credibility of the league itself. As the conversation spiraled, Caitlin Clark's fan base, one of the most vocal and loyal groups in all of women's sports, decided they'd had enough. Thousands began calling out Napheesa Collier directly across social platforms, exposing what they saw as hypocrisy and manipulation. Clips of Collier's interviews were edited side by side with her silence during Clark's toughest moments, painting a damning picture. Hashtags like #StopUsingCaitlin and #CollierCloutChasing began trending, Echoing across TikTok, Instagram, and X, the message was clear. If you didn't stand by Clark when she was being disrespected, you don't get to profit off her name now. Fan pages flooded comment sections of WNBA posts, defending Clark's integrity and success, while dismantling Collier's statements line by line. They pointed out that Clark's rise had brought unprecedented attention and money to the league, something no player had achieved before. Yet, instead of showing gratitude, certain veterans seemed intent on using her as a pawn in their contract negotiations. Caitlin built this momentum herself, one fan wrote. Now everyone wants a piece of it. The online pushback grew so intense that several media outlets began picking up the story. Sports analysts debated whether Collier had crossed a line, with some defending her intent, while others agreed that invoking Clark's name repeatedly looked more like a marketing move than a message of solidarity. Even neutral fans began shifting their stance, realizing that much of the so-called advocacy surrounding Clark wasn't genuine support, it was opportunistic branding. Meanwhile, Clark herself stayed silent, refusing to fuel the fire. That silence only strengthened her image. While others argued and postured, she focused on basketball, the very thing that made her a star. Fans admired that composure, seeing her as the calm center of chaos. Collier's words, once meant to spark unity, had now backfired spectacularly. The more she spoke, the more fans saw it as exploitation, and the more determined they became to defend Clark's name at all costs. By the time major sports outlets picked up the controversy, the situation had spiraled far beyond Napheesa Collier's control. What began as a few remarks about player pay had transformed into a full-blown media storm. Every sports talk show, podcast, and YouTube channel seemed to have an opinion, and none of them were flattering. Headlines read things like, "Collier crosses the line," and fans erupt after Caitlin's name used again. Within days, Collier's PR team was scrambling to shift the narrative, trying to paint her as a misunderstood advocate instead of an opportunist. But the internet wasn't buying it. In interviews, Collier insisted her words were taken out of context. She said she respected Caitlin Clark and was only trying to highlight the league's financial disparity. But every clarification sounded rehearsed, almost robotic, and fans noticed. Commenters flooded her posts with reminders of how her advocacy only appeared once Clark's fame reached global levels. One viral tweet summed it up perfectly. Don't call it advocacy when it's really envy wrapped in PR. Even fellow WNBA players were split. Some quietly liked or shared posts defending Clark, while others avoided the topic altogether, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. Behind the scenes, insiders claimed that several players were frustrated with Collier for reigniting tension that the league was trying hard to calm. The WNBA had spent months promoting unity and positivity, but this controversy ripped that narrative apart. Meanwhile, sports commentators began dissecting how this moment revealed the league's internal struggles. They argued that until players learn to celebrate success rather than resent it, growth will always come with drama. Clark, once again, was at the center of attention she never asked for. Yet while Collier fought to repair her image, Clark's reputation only grew stronger. Her silence, grace, and focus in the middle of chaos made her look like the true professional, while everyone else scrambled to explain themselves. But as the dust settled, a final question began echoing. What happens when fans, not the league, become the real voice of accountability? As the controversy reached its peak, something remarkable happened. The fans took control of the narrative. What started as outrage toward Napheesa Collier evolved into a full-on movement demanding accountability across the WNBA. They weren't just defending Caitlin Clark anymore, they were calling out the entire system that allowed players to exploit her name while offering her no protection. On social media, thousands began tagging the league's official accounts, urging them to step in and address what they called a culture of hypocrisy. The fans had become the watchdogs, and the league couldn't ignore them any longer. Every clip of Collier's interviews was dissected and reposted, often alongside footage of Clark being fouled, mocked, or targeted during games. The contrast was powerful. Fans framed it as a symbol of what's wrong with the league, stars who stay quiet when injustice happens, but speak up only when there's something to gain. It became bigger than Collier. It became a statement about credibility, consistency, and respect. For once, the media couldn't spin it. Independent creators, YouTubers, and commentators took over the conversation, exposing how the WNBA had failed to protect its most valuable player while allowing internal rivalries to fester. Some even argued that this entire ordeal showed why fans, not executives, are the true lifeblood of the sport, the ones keeping it honest. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark never said a word. She didn't have to. Her fans did all the talking, defending her image with a force no PR machine could manufacture. That silence became her greatest power, a contrast to the noise surrounding her. It reminded everyone that real respect isn't demanded in interviews, it's earned on the court. In the end, Collier's attempt to use Clark's name for leverage backfired spectacularly. The fans didn't just reject it, they rewrote the story entirely, proving that in today's world, the audience isn't just watching. They're judging, remembering, and ready to call out anyone who dares profit off someone else's name. In the end, this controversy wasn't just about Napheesa Collier's comments, it was a reflection of a deeper truth. Inside the WNBA, Caitlin Clark's rise has forced the league to face uncomfortable realities about jealousy, hypocrisy, and who truly supports growth versus who exploits it. While Collier's words tried to spark a movement, they instead revealed a divide she couldn't control. Through it all, Clark's silence spoke louder than any headline. Her fans proved that authenticity wins every time, and that the real power in women's basketball now lies in the voices of those who refuse to stay silent.